I think we need to stop
Slow.
the record. Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to stop the recording.
I hope everybody is. Oh, sorry. I just forgot that. Welcome everybody. I hope everybody is well. Today certainly doesn't look quite as gloomy and bleak as it has the last few days. Been very wet outside, hasn't it? So welcome today to the penultimate webinar that we're putting on as part of safeguarding season, safeguarding children and vulnerable adults who are potential victims of modern slavery and exploitation. And this is being delivered by Helen Stiles and Caroline Virgo from the Clewer Initiative. So I'll get them to introduce themselves just before they start the presentation. So I'm Lisa Pearson. I'm one of the assistant safeguarding advisors and also the cathedral advisor with the Ely Diocese. And I've also got my colleague here, the diocesan safeguarding advisor, Rebecca Boswell. So we form part of the safeguarding team. So the plan for today is, as I say, this is the penultimate safeguarding webinar. We've been really busy this week. We had the launch of safeguarding season on Monday at Ely Cathedral. So this was the Loud Fence event, which was supported by Jane Chavou, who's from Survivor Voices. She herself is a victim and survivor of church-based abuse. We also had Rape Crisis with us at Ely Cathedral. So for those of you who are not aware, the Loud Fence is an opportunity to visibly display support and solidarity for those who've been affected by abuse. So you can physically either attend the cathedral and place a ribbon. There's some labels also. So if you go in the main entrance of the cathedral, on the right hand side, you'll see a fence and there's a table with some ribbons and some sort of labels. You can write a message and attach that to the fence to mark sort of your solidarity and support to victims and survivors of all forms of abuse. And that's what we were doing on Monday. It's there all week. It is the Christmas fair at the cathedral. Rebecca and I were there on Wednesday night. It started off very quiet and then got extremely busy. So it may be a little bit difficult to get into the cathedral, and apologies for that. But we do have a virtual ribbon link. So if you go on the cathedral website or the diocesan website, if you follow the link through, you'll be able to place what's known as a virtual ribbon. So write a message, and then a member of the safeguarding team or the cathedral will then write the message out and place a ribbon on the gate on your behalf. So again, really, really important that we support victims and survivors of abuse. So as I say, this week we've had quite a number of, I think this is the 7th safeguarding webinar. We've been really fortunate to have local and national organisations and charities support safeguarding season here. We've had some really, so I hope many of you have been able to join those webinars. If you haven't, the hope is that we're going to be placing, they've all been recorded. So today's being recorded, but as you can see, the only faces will be visible will be Helen, Caroline, Rebecca and myself. So your faces will not be visible in the recording, and also any of your personal details like your name. So please be reassured that you're not going to be on the video, but we are hoping to post the videos on the website from all the majority of the webinars that have happened and occurred this week, because we know life is very busy. We have work, we have family, and you may not have been able to join one of the webinars that you were really keen on and interested in. So we are hoping to post those as soon as possible, so you'll be able to watch those in a time that suits you. So today's session should last for approximately about an hour. It may finish slightly early or may go over slightly. The plan for today is that if any time sort of point during today's session, if you would like to pose a question, or if you have any comments, there is at the bottom of your screen, you'll see the Q&A tab. So if you write in there whatever it is you'd like to say, they will be visible to myself and Rebecca, who will probably keep an eye on those, and sort of periodically we will ask Helen and Caroline and make them aware that we've got some questions or some comments. So at any time, by all means, just write that comment. Obviously, we're particularly mindful, bearing in mind the types of sort of discussions that we've been having this week, certainly around safeguarding as a topic, particularly when we're talking about different forms of abuse. You know, it can affect people in different ways. It can be extremely emotive and challenging, as well as triggering. So, you know, we all come from different backgrounds. We've all been exposed to different things and experiences within our lives. So today is very much around looking after ourselves. If you're aware or you've been affected, or you're aware if anyone else has been affected as a result of these or similar issues, please remember that there is support available for you from a number of organisations. So on the diocesan website, we do have a duty phone number that you can contact the safeguarding team, but there's also on the resource page a number of different organisations that you can contact for support and advice, and that includes Safe Spaces and Survivor Voices. So you're not alone here. We're very much here to support you and to listen to you. And if at any point today you feel that you need to step away, please do so. And as I say, if you need us to follow up with a phone call, please just pass us a message on the Q&A tab. I hopefully have covered everything. I hope so. If not, I'm sure Helen and Caroline will cover anything I've missed. So I'm now going to pass over to Helen, who's going to bring up the screen, but also, again, as I say, do their introduction. So thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you, Lisa and Rebecca. Thank you for inviting us to be with you today. And thank you to those of you who are attending. My name's Helen Stiles, and I'm a freelance safeguarding consultant, and I do lots of work with Caroline and the Clewer Initiative, and that's why I'm here today. Caroline, would you mind introducing yourself?
Thank you. So I'm Caroline Virgo, and I'm the director of the Clewer Initiative, which we'll hear a little bit more about that later on.
Wonderful. I'm just going to share my screen with you now. If anyone can't see that, please do pop something in the chat, and we can have a play around with it, but hopefully you can see that now. So the session today is about safeguarding children and vulnerable adults from modern slavery and exploitation. And as we said, the session will be facilitated by myself and Caroline. Obviously, because this session is being recorded and it is more of a webinar format, it is less interactive, but we do offer other training that is more interactive. So if after today you feel like you'd like more, we will be talking through the session about other opportunities to receive training. Okay, I think Lisa's covered most of the housekeeping. Just really important to echo that health warning that Lisa gave. Please look after yourselves in the session today. Have a think about who in your life is normally there to support you, that you might be able to speak to after the session in the event that anything has been triggering for you, or do contact the safeguarding team for support. In terms of our aims for today, we're going to learn a bit more about modern slavery in the UK, who it affects and the scale of the issue. We'll be thinking about the role of the church and the role of the Clewer Initiative, and we'll be working through the session using those 4 R's that you should all be familiar with. So when we're thinking about safeguarding, the 4 R's being recognise, respond, record and refer, so we know what action we need to take in terms of any safeguarding concerns that we may have. Okay, Caroline, over to you.
Thank you very much. So what we would like to do is to begin by showing you a short animation about the Clewer Initiative. And this actually forms part of our online safeguarding training, which is hosted on the Church of England National Safeguarding website. But it gives you an introduction to Clewer and just gives you an idea about how we work with the Church of England. Thank you, Helen.
Thank you.
The Clewer Initiative is the national work of the Church of England to combat modern slavery and exploitation. We were set up in 2016 following the Modern Slavery Act being agreed in 2015. We are funded by the Clewer Sisters, who are an order of Anglican nuns who donate generously to causes related to the eradication of human trafficking. Our key goal is to reduce the prevalence of modern slavery in our communities. Based on our belief that the tools to tackle modern slavery lie within communities, we work with local churches and communities to build resilience and support vulnerable groups. The Church, present in all communities and at the heart of many, has a primary responsibility in leading efforts to combat modern slavery. We also work at a national and international level through a range of partnerships, raising awareness and developing practical tools and resources for use by churches, communities, partners, and the public. Partnership is one of our core principles, and we collaborate not only within the Church of England, but also with law enforcement, local government, charities and wider faith networks. Locally, we are working in communities with small groups of volunteers. These groups are called Hidden Voices. We help our groups to look at the risks and resources in their community. We explore together how they can help to prevent modern slavery and identify and support the victims. We have developed innovative solutions helping to address the issue of modern slavery. Our Safe Car Wash app helps motorists identify and report modern slavery and exploitation at hand car washes. We have also created a range of successful online courses and training resources to help teach appropriate groups about specific areas of modern slavery and community resilience. To find out more about our work and how to get involved, please visit our website www.theclewerinitiative.org.
Thank you very much, Helen. So that gives a good overview of who we are and of our position within the National Church of England, and also wider nationally, internationally as well. So just to highlight some of the points on this slide, we are the national work of the Church of England to combat modern slavery. And we have three aims: awareness raising, leading to identification of victims, and then providing victim care and support. And this is done through bespoke training. You would have seen some sort of flashing examples in the animation of training that we provide. If you go onto our website, you can see more details of those. And it does tend to be a rolling program so that we aim to tackle the things that are happening at present time. We do awareness raising campaigns such as the Safe Car Wash campaign, our Lent campaigns, our Anti-Slavery Week campaigns. We have the Safe Car Wash app, we have the Farm Work Welfare app, and we're actually currently looking at developing a nail bar app with the beauty industry, which you should look out for next year because that should be really good. We've got loads of resources you can download, and a lot of those are now kept on the church publishing website. And if you follow the link to that, you can actually get some which are sent straight to you and order the number that you actually are going to use rather than asking us to send you a bundle. And finally, our key work is encouraging communities to take action and build resilience. And as the animation showed, that's done through our Hidden Voices groups. And we'd love to hear from anybody who would like to do any more work with us around modern slavery. Although I have to say that Ely, both the diocese and the cathedral, have been good partners for about 3 years now. So that you do have things happening there. Should we go on to the next slide, Helen? So this is another animation that we use, and I think I will just ask Helen to show it straight away, and then we'll talk a bit about what's on it later on.
Modern slavery is invisible. It lives among...
Oh, apologies. I'll try that again.
Modern slavery is invisible. It lives among us, within our communities, but often hidden to our eyes. Maybe the guy who cleans your building, the person who does your nails. It could be a neighbor, a classmate. It could be me. We are invisible because one day, someone made us a promise, and we believed them. They promised us a decent job.
Friendship, status, a sense of belonging.
A better life, a hopeful future.
Good money, a place to live.
Then, all of a sudden, they make those dreams disappear, and they hurt us, threaten our loved ones.
They steal our documents, control our bank accounts. They steal our freedom and choice, make us feel worthless, hopeless, invisible.
They take away who we are and make someone new, forcing us to serve.
To traffic and deal.
To labor in farms and factories.
To sell our bodies.
24 hours a day. On call. No time off.
Working for a tiny wage, paid in cash or no wage at all.
We can't go far. We owe them money.
We have to shut up, not say a word.
And that's how we turn invisible.
We don't want our friends or relatives to know that we live like this.
We are too scared, too desperate, too poor.
Too ashamed to speak up.
We don't want to see ourselves as slaves, to recognize that someone is making a good profit out of us, that we got trapped in a situation we cannot escape.
So we become invisible, tiny, microscopic. We are here though. We can be seen again, become visible. The spell can be broken in the simplest of ways, but it's not abracadabra. It can be, how are you? Who are you living with? What are your plans for the weekend? What dreams are you chasing?
Would you like the next slide, Caroline?
I'm sorry, I would like the next slide. Yes, please.
Here we go.
Here we are. So that film Invisible gives a good overview of some of the issues behind modern slavery. And what would be good now if we could actually focus down on some of the specific things so you're clear about them when you're thinking about it. So the first thing that we're going to do is to give you the definitions of modern slavery. And these are, there is a Modern Slavery Act 2015 that has these definitions in it. And so the way that we think about modern slavery, or the way that it's defined, is that it encompasses slavery, human trafficking, servitude, and forced or compulsory labour. And I think what's interesting about this is that over the years since the Modern Slavery Act was introduced, so that's about 7 years now, we've begun to think much more widely about what slavery looks like and what it means to be trapped or forced to work and to be in a situation. And so we now quite often, although the definition in the Act remains the same, we talk about modern slavery and exploitation. So we understand that exploitation can be on a continuum, ranging from what might be considered mild to being severe. I mean, I know it's not a very nice way to think about it. And I think a lot of the work that we have done in Clewer is to try and encourage people to think about the sort of soft end of the spectrum, where perhaps there's what would seem like minor exploitation, the sort of exploitation you might think, well, that doesn't really matter. But obviously there is potentially a slope where people can slip into a worse situation. And so that's what we're trying to encourage churches really to think about, how can we be involved from the earliest point? And I think Helen will talk about this a bit more as we come on. And I think the second point is that traffickers and slave masters use whatever means they have at their disposal to coerce, deceive, and force individuals into a life of abuse, servitude, and inhumane treatment. And I think if we think about our own lives, we would recognise, I mean, hopefully none of us have ever been in this situation where we really are trapped. But there are things that make you vulnerable. And very often it can be around a shortage of money or desire to provide for your family. I mean, that's the sort of thing that traffickers and slave masters will really get hold of and make a hook into you, and then effectively force you to do what they want you to do. Next slide, please. So just to come back to the precise definition, now I've talked about some of the ideas behind it. There has to be action or movement. And this is the movements trafficking itself is the movement of one person from one place to another into conditions of exploitation. So that would not just mean, asking, bringing somebody from, say, the refugee camps in Calais into the UK on a small boat. It could be moving your next door neighbour's teenage child into drug supply and moving them across the country. So it can be movement within the UK. And I mean, unfortunately, it very often has several elements of moving from one place to another. But it's a wide definition. So it has to be movement. It has to have means and control. So using deception, coercion, force, the abuse of power to actually make somebody do what you want them to do. And it always has to have a purpose of exploitation. So those are the three elements that have to be present in any definition of modern slavery. Helen, over to you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Caroline. So we've heard about the definitions of modern slavery, and under that umbrella term of modern slavery, there are different types of exploitation, and we have some of them displayed here in pictorial form. Modern slavery would include forced marriage, financial exploitation, domestic servitude, labour exploitation, organ harvesting, sexual exploitation, debt bondage, and criminal exploitation. And as Caroline's already referenced, there are a number of things that may make each of us vulnerable to modern slavery exploitation. And recruiters use a range of tactics to engage victims, and they do target places where there may be people who could be more vulnerable. So we need to be particularly aware when we're thinking about our food banks, homelessness projects, night shelters, those kinds of things, because you may have people within those projects who may be vulnerable, and exploiters may target them through your project. In terms of exploitation in the UK, obviously there's lots of exploitation that comes under that umbrella of modern slavery, but the four main forms in the UK are criminal exploitation, labour exploitation, sexual exploitation, and domestic servitude. Exploitation in coerced criminality has been increasing since about 2018 and has now overtaken labour and sexual exploitation for the first time. And county lines exploitation accounts for a significant proportion of that, and we will talk a bit more about that later in the session. Okay, we've got another video for you now. So this is a victim's story, so obviously comes with a health warning. If you feel like you don't want to listen to this now, please feel free to pause your video for a moment and step away. It's about 3 minutes long, so if you did want to nip off and make a cup of tea, then do so and come back after 3 minutes. I'm going to play that now.
I came with my husband from Syria in hope of a better life. War is no life. We paid a criminal gang a lot of money to transport us. We came through Cali in the back of a lorry, which was terrifying. We were so relieved to arrive, so full of hope, but we still owed for the journey. We were very vulnerable. We had nowhere to live. We couldn't speak the language. We were in a country with no right to work, but we were desperate to work to pay off our debt. And we were separated from the people we knew. My husband and I were kept apart. And the gang promised us to find us work so we can pay off our debt. They forged the work documents, which cost a lot of money, and my debt kept on growing 10% a week. So I was trapped. I was sent to work in a food factory, my wages taken from me. I couldn't tell my family back home what had happened to me. I was too ashamed of what my life in England had become. I couldn't tell anyone in the factory because I didn't want to get deported. And our exploiters always kept us looking very pristine with decent clothes and silk scarves, makeup. They didn't want us looking like slaves. They were clever. And I took pride in my appearance. I didn't want anyone to know the mess I was in. And so it went on. And one day, my exploiter came to the flat to get my wages, and I challenged him. I didn't want to be a slave. He grabbed me by the neck, he half strangled me, and the next day at work, I broke down. And my employer asked me what was wrong. He could see the marks on my neck. And the truth came out. He helped me escape. He called the police. All I ever wanted was a better life for myself and my family.
So really powerful testimony there from Hannah, and really clearly demonstrates the fact that most human trafficking and modern slavery is the work of serious and organised crime groups, can be very dangerous. She talked about how clever they are and how nimble they can be in terms of changing things around to make sure that we're not able to recognise the signs of modern slavery, and those multiple vulnerabilities that Hannah had that made her vulnerable to that exploitation. So when we're talking about modern slavery, it's important that we understand the kind of support mechanisms that are available for victims. So the National Referral Mechanism, or the NRM, is the government system for identifying, referring and supporting victims of modern slavery in this country. And we're going to have a look at some of the stats relating to that. The stats we're going to look at come with a big kind of caveat. The numbers of victims that go into the NRM represent a very, very small number of the estimated victims in the UK. So there's an estimated 100,000 victims of modern slavery and exploitation in the UK. So let's have a look at some of those stats. So the NRM stats for 2021 are that just under 13,000 potential victims of modern slavery were in the NRM. And when we think about that estimated figure of around 100,000 victims, clearly that is a very small number of those people that we believe are affected by this. Very male heavy in terms of those who are accessing support, and there may be a number of reasons for that, but one of the reasons is the type of exploitation that men and women experience. So women are more commonly exploited sexually or for domestic servitude, so they are often even less visible than the male victims, who are much more likely to be exploited in terms of labour exploitation. So men in labour exploitation may be more likely to be out and about, and possibly maybe more likely to be able to access support, whereas women are often tucked away in a private home or another setting that is very difficult for them to leave or to ask for help. In terms of the nationalities of those entering the NRM in 2021, and these do move around quite a bit because it depends on those push and pull factors, so what's going on around the world that will make people more vulnerable potentially. But in 2021, UK nationals were the biggest proportion in terms of nationality entering the NRM. Often people are quite surprised by that, because often people don't think of UK nationals as being people who could be vulnerable to modern slavery, but they absolutely are, and we can see that from these statistics. There may be a number of reasons why UK nationals are more likely to be able to access the system and access support. Obviously, there's potentially less language barriers. They may have more trust in the system, may have more ability to know where to go to seek help. For children entering the NRM, criminal exploitation was the kind of biggest category of exploitation that they were experiencing. And again, county lines account for a significant proportion of that. And for adults, the biggest category was labour exploitation. We've got some statistics here for part of this year. The statistics are released every quarter, so we've got up until September there, and you can see up until September there were just over 12,500 potential victims. The last quarter that were reported on were the highest number of victims ever entering the NRM, and we can see from that that this year's statistics are likely to be much higher than last year's. Same sort of balance in terms of male and female, but we'll see there that the nationalities have moved around, and again that's about the different push and pull factors, and the types of exploitation that are most prominent have remained the same. So a little chart here from the Salvation Army. So the Salvation Army provide the support for victims entering the NRM. And this is their kind of breakdown of statistics in terms of the type of exploitation that people are experiencing by gender. And we can see there that the biggest category for males is labour exploitation, followed by cannabis farms. And for females, it's sexual exploitation, followed by labour exploitation, followed by domestic servitude, followed by labour exploitation. So the way this manifests is different depending on the gender of the person affected. Caroline.
Thank you very much, Helen. So we are going to watch another film in a minute, and this is a film about county lines. Now, I think that some people are surprised that this is counted as a form of modern slavery, because I think sort of for its essence, we think about it as being children or young people who are forced to deal in drugs for gangs. But if we think about it, it's obvious that a lot of the elements of all the elements of modern slavery are involved in this, the movement, the coercion, and the control. And so this film, I think, sets it out. And then we'll just have a look at some facts about county lines. And just before we play the film, I would like to say this has been one of our most successful areas that we've worked in over the past 18 months or so. Sadly, due to the pandemic, this was one form of modern slavery that really escalated. And the police have told us that during that period, young people would move around, but sometimes between cities, and often undetected, because there just weren't a lot of people around to see them. And we have been providing training to youth leaders, to teachers, to the police and GLAA, all sorts of statutory services around county lines, and providing them with materials to be able to go on and talk about that within their own community. And again, those courses are available to sign up on our website. So should we look at the film, Helen? Is that all right?
Yeah, I'll play that now.
Thank you.
It comes suddenly. Heart racing, huge surge of panic. I'm back there. He was called Ty. He was the gang leader. I was no one and he picked me. I hated my mum's new boyfriend. And now I have one of my own. We all took drugs.
I didn't want to stand out, so I took them to. Went into a world of numbness off my face most days. Then one day he said, I can't give them to you for free no more. You've got to work for them. We get the call and I would take the crack, the heroin, to the person who ordered it, bring back the cash. Sometimes I had to carry the drugs inside me, and I had to go anywhere. Strange places that scared me, in parts of the country I'd never even heard of. I was frightened all the time. My boyfriend was just using me to run county lines. He didn't love me. Then Wendy found me. The police had spotted me, and she was the one that reached out and got me away. So now I live in a safe house, different part of the country, trying to rebuild my life. But it's hard. Getting off drugs is hard. And I don't think I'll ever trust anyone again. And I'm still scared.
Thank you, Helen. Could we look at the next slide, please? So these are some facts about county lines. We will be providing you with the pack of slides after we've finished, and so you can take these away and have a look at them. So as I've said, county lines is the dominant form of modern slavery affecting children in the UK, and it did also grow hugely during the pandemic. The general demographic targeted is young people aged 14 to 17. But through the work that we've done, through training youth workers and police and other people involved with young people, there are reports that we've heard of children as young as 7 being groomed and being asked to carry drugs around. And actually, the other thing that's worth mentioning is that it doesn't, we may think it's just present in a certain demographic of children, but in fact it exists right across the class structure, and we have again been told even of young people who are being privately educated getting involved in this sort of activity. So where you grow up, it's no real guarantee. So in 2021 there were 2,053 county lines victims, which was a 23% increase from 2020. And we don't yet have the figures for 2022. The referrals for county lines accounted for 16% of all referrals, and the majority of these were for male children, which is partly why we've chosen a female victim story, because obviously women are involved and can be not only involved in the drug aspect of it, but also in sort of sexual exploitation as well as a result of their involvement with the drugs. We know that there are 1,000 different county lines operating, the majority of them originating from London, West Midlands and Merseyside. And we notice it incorporates multiple forms of exploitation. I think, again, we saw some of those in the film. So coercion, trafficking, child sexual exploitation, and increasingly gun and knife crime are becoming part of that methodology. As I've mentioned, if the young people are involved in county lines, they are victims of criminal exploitation, and they can be prosecuted, the adult gang members, under the Modern Slavery Act. And I think it's, I don't think we've mentioned on this webinar so far, but there is a sort of exemption for being prosecuted for modern slavery if you are shown to be a victim. And so that can be a defence to a charge of modern slavery. for people involved in criminal exploitation. And actually, you possibly would also find that in activities like cannabis farming. And I think it's probably not clear from what we've seen so far, but female victims are less likely to be discovered. That's a known fact. And they're often asked to carry the drugs and the weapons because the police are much more likely to suspect them than they are to suspect males. So those give you the main facts. You can take it away and have a look at them. And I would mention again that we do run some very good county lines training if you're interested in learning more about it. Helen, can I pass back to you now, please?
Of course. Okay, so we're going to be thinking now about recognising concerns. And as Caroline's alluded to, anyone can be a victim. And actually, because of the high money stakes involved in modern slavery and human trafficking, the organised crime groups are very nimble in terms of their approach and will try to recruit victims who perhaps are less likely to be noticed, particularly when it comes to criminal exploitation. It's important that we always remember that we will recognise vulnerability more readily in some people than others. So it's just being aware of where your own bias might be and making sure that you're not missing things because of that. So we've got some indicators of potential modern slavery or signs and symptoms, and we've split them into 4 categories. We've got 2 of them on this first slide, and then I have another slide. The Clewer Initiative have some posters, which Caroline spoke about earlier, that you can order from their website, and they do have some posters that have this information on them to help raise awareness within your community. So in terms of indicators or signs and symptoms, the first category we've got is appearance. So the person may show signs of physical or psychological abuse and have untreated illness or injuries. They may look malnourished or unkempt or appear withdrawn and neglected. They may seem under the control or influence of others. They may wear the same clothes every day. They may wear no safety equipment even when their work requires it. So that car wash app that Caroline referred to earlier, one of the questions in that is about the safety equipment that the people in the car wash may or may not have, because often can be a key indicator. The second category we've got is accommodation. So people living in dirty, cramped or overcrowded accommodation, living and working at the same address, or people who perhaps appear unfamiliar with their neighbourhood or where they work. So people are often moved from where they are staying to their place of work and back again, and have very little ability to go anywhere else. So if they do find themselves out in the community, may be very confused and not really know where they are. These are the next 2 categories. So we'll start with travel. So rarely allowed to travel on their own, collected and dropped off on a regular basis in the morning or late at night, in a crowded minibus with other workers, or have no control over their identification documents such as their passport. So that's one of the tactics that's often used in terms of controlling victims, is around removing their key documents, making it very difficult for them to prove who they are, or their right to be here, or to apply for right to be here. So that can be make somebody very, very vulnerable indeed. And our last category is seeking help. So they may be reluctant to seek help and avoid eye contact. They may appear frightened or hesitant to talk to strangers. They may fear the police, don't know who to trust or where to get help. And they may be very afraid of deportation and the risk of violence to them or their family. So often people are controlled by threats of harm, either to themselves or to their family members, or indeed to both. When we think about vulnerabilities of victims of modern slavery, so experiencing modern slavery can make somebody extremely vulnerable, and the sorts of things that they may experience are trauma, emotional distress, a lack of trust. There may be a language barrier. They may not be familiar with UK rights and systems. They may be extremely isolated, experiencing poverty, have a lack of employment, a lack of housing, an unknown future, and the length of the statutory process can also make people vulnerable as well. So we looked at those figures for the national referral mechanism. There are clear timescales for that that support system, but actually those very often slip, and that can lead to people becoming further more vulnerable because they are waiting for an outcome and they don't know when that's going to arrive. In terms of our response, when we suspect or know that there is a potential case of modern slavery, obviously, as always, if there is an emergency, then you need an emergency response, which is a 999 call. If you are having to take emergency action in that way, please do make sure that you link in with your safeguarding lead, so your diocesan safeguarding officer or advisor, or your cathedral officer or advisor, or your local safeguarding lead as soon as possible once that has happened. Most things we deal with aren't an emergency, thankfully, and we do have the opportunity to seek help and advice. So do that through your safeguarding route. Lisa mentioned at the beginning the diocesan website and the details for contacts on there, including the out-of-hours service. When you're dealing with a case of modern slavery, it won't always require a safeguarding response, but we would really encourage you to seek advice from your safeguarding lead on all occasions. Because working around modern slavery can be potentially dangerous, and you need to make sure that you have the appropriate support and advice to do that effectively. But also, you may not always be in a position to establish whether safeguarding action is required or not. So really, really important to consult with somebody who is an expert on that to help you establish what action does need to be taken. Make sure that you keep a record of what's happened, so all of your concerns and the actions that you've taken. Confidentiality is really important, so it is really important that you share the information, but that you do so in line with your safeguarding policy and procedures, so that you're only sharing that information with others who need to know. And it's always essential that we always do something, so we're not just making a note of it, we're actually taking some action as well. In terms of our recording, you would follow your normal recording procedures as in any case of safeguarding. So that really good, clear, factual record, recording exactly what you have seen or exactly what you have been told. If you're recording something you've been told, make sure you use as closely as you can the person's words. Even if perhaps the language they've used wouldn't be the language that you would use, it's important we're not changing that, because that could change the meaning of what's been said. So that thinking about what's happened, who was involved, when did it happen, where did it happen, and what actions have been taken. Really important that you put your details on there as well, and that you let your safeguarding lead know that you have made a record. Okay, I'm just going to stop my share now, and Caroline and I are just going to have a quick conversation around some of the things that commonly come up around modern slavery. So I'll stop the share now. I'll just check first with Lisa and Rebecca that there's no questions that we need to respond to. No, got a shaking head, that's fine. So I've got a question for you first, Caroline. What would you say are the most common misconceptions about identifying modern slavery?
Thank you, Helen. I think there's a number of themes that repeatedly come up. The first one is that modern slavery even happens in the UK. People tend to think it's something that happens overseas, if it happens at all. And many people think it was eliminated during the period when slaving was used extensively during the 17th and 18th century. So it does happen in the UK. It also exists in every community. And as we work around the country, we hear all sorts of stories about people who are potentially in conditions of modern slavery or exploitation. And, you know, they can be wealthy areas, they can be poor areas. It doesn't seem to make any difference at all. We know that the victims, well, this is another misconception, came from more than 130 different countries. But again, contrary to expectations, the top country of origin has been, well, up to 2020, the UK. We saw that with this year's NRM figures, it looks as though it might be Albania. And I think many of us may have seen reasons in the paper for that. But the UK is definitely up there with very large numbers. People often ask about who victims are. And we try and just emphasize that they can be anybody. There isn't one particular typology of victim, so you have to have your wits about you and to think about all the people that we meet. And the final thing is, I mean, people sometimes seem to think, that somebody's there with a sign, on their chest saying victim of modern slavery. That's not true. The signs are very often extremely difficult to spot. The victims wouldn't self-identify necessarily as victims of modern slavery. And that can be the case. I mean, we've heard a really sad story about someone who was held actually captive for some time and suffered appalling injuries from his captors. And even having spent an extended period in one of the safe house, still could not see himself as somebody who had been exploited. So it can often be very difficult to, see what's right and what isn't. They very often. Sorry.
No, you carry on. I'll add something at the end.
Do add something, Helen.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Sorry to interrupt. No, I was just going to say that's really, really helpful. And that kind of recognizing yourself as a victim can be a really tricky thing, can't it? And sometimes that's about those tactics that exploiters use in terms of grooming people and hooking them in with that initial relationship, whether that's about a close, intimate relationship or a friendship or a professional relationship. But that can happen to the extent that the person really and truly believes that even in spite of the harm and the exploitation, that actually they are in some kind of meaningful relationship with the exploiter.
Well, yes, that's correct. And I think it's quite interesting as well. I mean, just sort of turning our thoughts to what sort of things you might see in Ely. I mean, I understand that the whole sort of farming and food processing is an issue in your area. And, I think with those people, or people, so I shouldn't say those people in those sorts of situations, it is often very difficult for the person to recognise themselves as a victim, particularly difficult. And, that is why that when we designed the Farm Work Welfare app, we actually have a section for fellow employees, because it's very often those people working alongside, who ask the subtle questions, that find out what somebody's freedom is like, for example, at the weekends, by whether they've actually managed to have a social life, whether they've, got access to the sort of food that they like. I mean, they can be very subtle questions, but ones which can really point towards identification of people in difficulties. And, I think it's worth adding, Helen, as well, that, we might, I mean, you can obviously amplify this, is that, very often we don't deal with things under the Modern Slavery Act. Sometimes an employer can be very upset and surprised that somebody is held in that condition, and they will make the necessary changes to give the person a safe and legal employment. It doesn't always have to go through the statutory services to the police. So,
Yeah, that's really important, and it's important that employers really think about their procedures so that they are reducing the risks, isn't it? So, things like if somebody asks to have their wages paid into somebody else's bank account, for example, and making sure there's a conversation around that. If you have many employees who are all registered at the same address, take the trouble to Google Maps it and see how big that accommodation is and whether that looks suspicious. Because, as you say, sometimes employers are completely unaware of what's happening.
Well, thank you. And can I just ask you, Helen? I mean, what do you think are some of the biggest barriers to people, wanting to report or to discuss these issues?
Yeah, and I think it is really difficult for people, isn't it, with any safeguarding issues, but particularly around modern slavery. I think there is a lack of understanding around what modern slavery is and what the signs might be. So sometimes the barrier is that people aren't recognising it in the first place, and that's why they're not doing anything. We also know there is quite a disconnect between kind of taking modern slavery action and safeguarding action. So we see that within the church, we see that in other agencies as well. So when we talk to people like directors of adult services, they tell us that they get very, very few referrals relating to modern slavery. But we know that sometimes people are taking action to get intervention in other ways. So it's making sure that that is all joined up. I think people worry about interfering, and they also worry about potential risks. You know, am I going to make this worse if I do something? But it's always important to remember that we can get advice from our safeguarding teams, that we also have sources of support externally, and we can often get that support anonymously as well. So it's about working with your safeguarding people to get the advice to understand what do we have to do and what would be good practice to do, and then making sure we do something, even if it's about raising a concern without giving a person's individual details, if that's not what they want, and we don't need to do that in terms of our safeguarding responsibility. So all that we can do to raise awareness of this issue and help people within our communities be able to recognise concerns, but also making sure that when we're running projects where we may be more likely to identify victims, or where projects that may be more likely to be targeted, that we're robustly risk assessing those, training our staff and volunteers, and making sure everyone knows what to look for and what do they need to do about it if they see something that they're worried about. I think those things would help.
Thank you very much, Helen. So we are sort of heading towards the end of the presentation now. I'm just in case everybody, you know, is beginning to think how much longer are they going on for. I'm sure you wouldn't think that. So I'm just going to hand over to Helen to conclude the safeguarding part, and then I'm going to use the opportunity of having you as a captive audience just to talk about our latest campaign very quickly, and then we'll do the conclusions and the wrap up. So thank you very much.
Wonderful, thank you, Caroline. Okay, I'm just going to pop the slides back up for you.
Thank you.
Okay, so we are going to think about referring concerns. So always refer concerns through your safeguarding route. Really important that you do that. It may be that there is further information held by your local safeguarding lead or your diocesan or cathedral safeguarding team, and it is really important that all of that information is held together. So do use your safeguarding route, but be aware that there are some additional places we can get support. So the advice and support you get back from your safeguarding lead may be slightly different when it's around cases of modern slavery. So we have the option of referring to a first responder agency. So we talked about the national referral mechanism. We can't refer people directly into that. You have to be a first responder agency. There are a range of those. We don't list them off because they do change, but they include people like Border Force, the police, the Salvation Army, the Modern Slavery Helpline. But it's important that we're aware that that is an option. We've got the National Crime Agency, the Gang Masters and Labour Abuse Authority, or the GLAA. They're really helpful where you perhaps have a concern about a venue or employer, and you don't perhaps have an individual person that you're concerned about. They have powers to investigate. They will also investigate things that aren't modern slavery but are labour abuse issues. So if you've got something that you're not sure kind of where it sits in terms of thresholds, they can be really useful in terms of looking into that. And obviously we have our usual source of support through social care, police and housing. Okay, so whether you're in the session now or whether you're watching this in the future, really important that you, as part of your reflection following this session, that you think about how you can apply what you've learned today in your setting. Think about risk assessments. So often people don't do appropriate risk assessments, or don't do them at all, or don't include all of the safeguarding risks, including modern slavery. So please do consider modern slavery when you're doing your risk assessments, and make sure that you review them regularly based on any new information or local intelligence. Think about how you're going to cascade the learning from today. So how are you going to share the knowledge and ensure that others also have some of the information that you have? And think about whether you would be able to advertise the training that the Clewer Initiative offer. Caroline, I'll pass over to you.
Thank you very much. So this is just to talk very quickly about our campaign, which we've got this year, which is called Make It Slavery Free. So I think one of the things that we have felt is that, or recognise, is that people find it very difficult to think what they can do, and we felt it would be helpful for people to feel that they were part of a bigger campaign. And so what we have done is we've made some suggestions of things that people can do to help make their community slavery free. Can we have the next slide, please, Helen?
I think the animations are still on the slides, so they changed themselves. Hopefully that one will stay up now.
Yes, sorry. Okay, so I'll just talk about it quickly. So our commitment, we hope, is, as the Church of England, that we would want to work towards a slavery-free community. But we also recognise that within our churches there are many individuals, and they may feel that their business also wants to be slavery free. And so we've listed a number of actions, 8 of them altogether. And what we've asked people to do is to make a pledge, and within that to choose 3 anti-slavery day actions. And you can find a list of their actions and resources and more details about it on our website under Slavery Free. And I'm going to move on now because we are actually running out of time. I just wanted to highlight one piece of work that we have done at Ely Cathedral. So this has been part of an extended piece of work with the Learning Centre. And actually I can see that we're in a position to be able to watch this video, Helen. Would you
like me to play it?
I would, yes, please.
Okay, I'll play that now.
So we've been making kites. These are children from Ely, and they are making small kites and running around this fantastic chapel. The exciting bit is that they are doing this as solidarity with children in southern Italy who come from Bangladesh, Afghanistan, Syria, who have done exactly the same activities. So for me, this is really exciting. This is about a world joined up together and children with the same aspirations celebrating kites together.
So that's just a sort of snapshot of what's happened at Ely, and it was part of an extended piece of work that was delivered with the Cathedral Learning Centre, which began, well, the actual work was delivered last year, 2021, and there were films about migration, what it meant to be a migrant, what it meant to be, going into exploitation and slavery from that. And then we followed on the learning this year with the support of the Learning Centre, with the exhibition, and then with the kite workshop. And as we said, it's a fun way of bringing, or a fun and appropriate way of bringing to light some of the issues around modern slavery with children and with young people who, after all, we hope will be the future and will be looking towards a much fairer and more just world than the one that we've allowed ourselves to fall into. Next slide, please, Helen.
I think it's back to me now.
It is back to you.
Yeah, thank you, Caroline. And that event in Ely was really, really successful. And I love watching that video. It really makes me smile, and hopefully it made you smile as well. So we've come to the end of our session. So what we've learned today is that modern slavery can be very hidden. It's really important that we look at ways in which we can raise awareness and support our church officers, so support others within the church to ensure that our communities are safer places. One of the things that we can all do following today is to think about our own choices. If you're buying a t-shirt for £4, then it's highly likely that somebody somewhere along the way in that supply chain has been exploited, and possibly multiple people. So think really carefully about where and how you spend your money. Recognising and responding to concerns relating to modern slavery can be very challenging. We need to work together to make sure that we do this effectively, and that means making sure that you are working in line with your safeguarding policy. Caroline, do you want to say something about the newsletter before we close?
Yes, please, I would. So I think one of the things that that we do really well as an organisation is to provide a good newsletter, which comes out about once a month. But in the newsletter, we link, we list our current things that are happening, which includes training, but things of particular interest that we've done. But also it does talk a bit about some of the wider issues, and so it is worth reading, and we are trying to encourage people to sign up to it. That's why we've got that QR code, but also you can sign up by going onto our website. So please do, and please try and keep up in touch with what we're doing, because this is a really important issue for us all.
Wonderful, thank you, Caroline. In terms of further training, you can find out about further training by signing up to that newsletter, looking at the Clewer Initiative website and their socials. There is also an e-learning module, which we have already mentioned, which is focused around modern slavery and is available on the Church of England Learning Portal. So you find that in the same place as your other safeguarding e-learning. So you create a login, go on, and you will find the Clewer Initiative training on there as well. That's it from us. Thank you very much for having us today. I'll just do one last check. Any questions in the Q&A?
No, not at the moment, but we'll give people, if anyone wants to make any comments before we finish, you've got an opportunity to do that now. I'd just like to say, certainly from my point of view, I've had previous training from the Clewer Initiative, but every time I listen to you, I learn something new every time, and it's a good opportunity to refresh my own knowledge. But I found today particularly informative and powerful, particularly the videos that you showed. It was really nice seeing the last one with the Ely Cathedral. That did bring a smile to my face, but it really makes you think that this, this happens to real people. And I think often we forget that, and we see everything that's happening on the TV, and we don't necessarily relate that it could be happening in our church and cathedral communities and our wider communities. So I think today's been really, really informative, and hopefully people will go away with that knowledge and think about how can they apply that within, as I say, the church or cathedral or wider communities. And I know we talk about sort of professional curiosity, and we don't necessarily mean you have to be a professional to be curious. If you've got that nagging doubt, be nosy. And people say, well, I don't like being nosy, but for me, I'm quite happy to be told you're being nosy if it means protecting and supporting sort of our communities. So as Helen and Caroline said, there's lots of extra information available on their websites around information on training campaigns. You've got your posters and your leaflets, things that you can download. So I do hope that signposting you to the website, you'll be able to get that extra information. And obviously we're here, the safeguarding team are here for you. If you have any concerns or any questions that you haven't put in today, but afterwards you have time to reflect, please, contact us through the duty phone. We're very happy to have those conversations and to listen to you. And just to remind you that, as I say, on our resource page, we also have those support organisations available. If today, you feel that you do need to reach out and just seek some extra support. So again, it's about looking after ourselves. So many thanks to Helen and Caroline. There are no questions that are coming forward, so I think you've provided so much information that nobody needs to ask any more questions. But as I say, if anyone does have any further questions, please come back to us, and hopefully, as you said, the slides will be available. We are hoping, as I said, to put some of the recordings up on the cathedral and diocesan websites so people can access these videos at a time that's suitable to them as well. We've got one final webinar at 1 o'clock today, which is it's actually a video recording by Dr. Lisa Oakley, who's a Associate Professor of Applied Psychology at the University of Chester. She's also the chair of the Church of England Working Group into Spiritual Abuse. She unfortunately couldn't be present today, but she's very kindly put a 22-minute video together about what is spiritual abuse, what is the impact, and what are the features of a good response. So if you've not been able to sign up for that particular webinar, you have an opportunity now, just under 2 hours, to sign up for that. I think it's going to be really informative. So certainly from me, a big thank you for your time and efforts putting that presentation together, and for your time today coming to speak to Helen and Caroline. So from me, thank you very much. I don't know, Rebecca, if you've got anything else you would like to say before we close.
Say, echo what you've said, Lisa, and our gratitude to Helen and Caroline for supporting our safeguarding season, and always food for thought when we hear this information, and the videos for me were incredibly powerful.
Thank you so much. So hopefully people now, what's the time? Not quite lunchtime, maybe tea and a biscuit would be good. So hopefully people can just perhaps go away, think about something completely different, do something nice just to reset yourself for the rest of the day. As I say, the weather's not too bad, so I'll probably take my dogs out soon. But anyway, we're closing now. So everybody have a lovely rest of the day. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.